Hello, it's me again. It's been a long time since I've done one of these. I've thought about it often, but other things were going on, I suppose. And, well, I didn't feel I had all that much to say, but I do have things to say, and in particular I wanted to say something about this birthright citizenship thing that everyone's talking about, because I think a lot of people are misunderstanding what birthright citizenship is and how it relates to our American form of government, our government of the people, by the people, and for the people that President Lincoln talked about. And so I was thinking that when back in 1776 the founders issued the Declaration of Independence, they stated a very bold principle that they were not subjects to the King of England as they had been, but rather that as free Americans they had the right to, as they put it, to dissolve the bonds that tied them to England. And so they set up a government that was not based on monarchy, not based on the accidents of who got born as to which family, as to who got to be king and ruler, but rather a government that where the people chose their own form of government. They chose their own government, they elected people, and that's really been core to how Americans do government. Now, it seems pretty natural to us now, 250 years later, but at the time it was revolutionary in every sense of the word. There weren't many elected governments at a scale larger than a town, anyway, and now it's the American experiment has been so successful it's caught on around the world, so that even in Russia they have sham elections. There's no question that Vladimir Putin will win every national election, but they still feel the need to pretend, and I think that's interesting. But there's an important point here. If you have the government, the people choose the government rather than the government just governing by some fate, the people, then there's who gets to vote, who gets to choose, right? And this is important, because if you get this is the role that birthright citizenship plays in America. Now, the founders didn't start with birthright citizenship. They started with the idea that property owners should get a vote, and people who didn't own property should not get a vote. Now, this is very elitist, right? And some people don't own real land property, and by property they really meant land, profitable land, a certain amount. Now, interestingly, as I was doing a bit of reading before recording this, I was reminded that actually early on, women property owners could often vote in the 1700s, long before the 19th Amendment. But the idea that only wealthy people could vote was at odds with what was written in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And so America moved away from the idea that you had to have a certain amount of property in order to be able to vote, to the idea that all men should be able to vote, regardless of how much property they had. Now, in the process of saying that all men should vote, then they also took the vote away from the propertied women. The women who had property, who had voted earlier, could no longer vote. Now, there's this odd ambiguity in the English language, right? That when we say man or mankind, sometimes we include women and sometimes we exclude women. So that's why some people prefer to say humanity now, to make sure that they're including men, women, and manatees. That's a joke. I'm not very good at jokes. But when we say that all men are created equal, if you don't believe that women are included, I encourage you to take that up with your mother. Maybe she'll have some things to say to you about that. There certainly were people back in the 1700s and 1800s who did include women in the notion that all men are created equal. There's one that I read many years ago. What was her name? Mary Wollstonecraft. She responded to the French Revolution, which issued a Declaration of the Rights of Man. She responded with a Declaration of the Rights of Woman, to say that women also have rights. And the ambiguity really didn't serve anyone well. So this is why in 1920, after many, many years of arguing about it, the constitutional amendment was passed, granting women the right to vote on equal status with men. So men and women vote equally. There's also, of course, the issues that some people thought that black people couldn't vote. Maybe only white people should be able to vote. Right? And this was a commonly held view, unfortunately, but it also violates this principle that all men are created equal. The Declaration of Independence didn't say anything about skin color or races. Racism is a violation of that principle in the Declaration of Independence. And so the rights and the citizenship of black people were acknowledged after the Civil War almost destroyed this country in 1865. But then people found workarounds and shenanigans, legal shenanigans, trying to prevent black people from ever voting. They were far too successful, and that's why we needed the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s. This is why the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had to be active. This is also why many Americans really hated him, the racist Americans who thought that black people should be inferior, should be kept inferior. Whereas if you give black people a fair chance to compete with white people, they compete just fine. So there's been some arguments over the course of this country as to who gets to vote and who counts as the people to choose the government. And we all agree, right, that a certain level of maturity is required. We all agree that children should not be voting. Little children, I mean. Like, you don't want to ask a toddler who should be president of the United States of America. There's no way the toddler could understand the question or what the question entails. But we've moved towards a more perfect union, to put it in the language of the Constitution, a more perfect union which guarantees that adult men and women of every race have the right to vote. And this principle is guaranteed by birthright citizenship. Because if you exclude birthright citizenship, then you give the government the opportunity to choose the people rather than the people the opportunity to choose the government. Then you get the government reintroducing those shenanigans that had to be struck down in the 1960s. So in general, a good principle when talking about government, when talking about policy, is to think about not what would I like to use this for, but to think about what would it be like if the shoe were on the other foot, as the saying goes, right? Think about the worst politician in Washington, and think about what they would do with this policy if they could. This is why we have the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution were to say government may run a certain way, but there are limits. There are things that government cannot do. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or abridging the freedom of the press or assembly. I'm not getting that word perfect. It's been a while since I looked that one up. Right, so the Bill of Rights are to protect American citizens from our government, to make sure that the government can't turn evil, can't be oppressive and tyrannical against Americans. That's why we need birthright citizenship. So imagine, right, if you're a Republican, you might say, well, I think President Trump can be trusted with this idea of who should be a U.S. citizen and who should not. But imagine and pick whatever Washington politician you like least, Imagine if a Democratic politician would say, all right, well, if we're not going with birthright citizenship, then we can make some rules as to who gets to be a citizen and who doesn't. So maybe we want to make a rule that actually gun owners are no longer citizens. Or maybe we want to make a rule that at least NRA members are no longer citizens, or something like that. Silly things. Absolutely un-American things. Crazy talk. No business of that in America. But on the other hand, for Democrats, they look and they don't trust President Trump, what President Trump wants to do with birthright citizenship. And so we need birthright citizenship to ensure that the people choose the government, not the government choosing the people that they want. We need birthright citizenship to ensure that this is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If we lose birthright citizenship, then we are no longer the Republic of the United States of America. And I think that's a very important point. So that's what I wanted to say. I hope you all have a good day.